Welcome to Starting Nowhere. I'm your host, Brandon. Make sure that you like and subscribe to see more Starting Nowhere. Today, my guest is Nelson Tressler. Nelson is the author of the Unlucky Sperm Club book, and believe me, we'll get into that title. Nelson has a great backstory that allowed him to build himself into the person he is today, and he wants to share that with everyone else. This is a great episode for a lot of motivation, but also there's going to be a ton of links in the description below. Make sure you click them because Nelson is giving away a bunch of free information, including a free month to his app, I Got Smarter. Enjoy today's episode. Welcome today, Mr. Nelson. How are you doing, sir?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm living the dream, man. Enjoying this actually cooler weather I finally have. I don't think we've talked about this, but I live in Miami, and so generally speaking, we don't get a lot of cool weather here. But the past couple of days, it's been 60 degrees. It's kind of reminding me growing up in the Midwest.
Yeah, I'm in Vegas, so we kind of get the same, but we actually get a little bit of cold weather in the winter. So
Yeah, I've heard that about the desert. I personally have only experienced it a little bit. I did some time out in the Middle East, in Qatar, and they'd had that same thing when the sun goes down and the breeze comes over those dunes and everything. It can get pretty chilly, and you wouldn't expect that.
yep, yeah, I think that's Vegas.
Yeah. So obviously, I'm very excited to talk to you because I saw your story when you posted it in the group, and it was just mind-boggling, first of all, and then the positivity that came through that story, I think is just really, really worth sharing to as many people as possible. So if you would please go ahead and give us a little bit of your background and share the same story that you kind of told me in the Facebook group with everybody else.
Yeah, appreciate it. Well, yeah, I've got quite the origin story. My mom became pregnant with me when she was 15 years old. My mom is one of 15 children. Her father was the local trash collector in a small town. One day, he drove into the town square. There, he spotted two police officers. He then stuck a gun out the window and opened fire on those police officers, killing one and critically wounding the other. And he was eventually captured and brought to stand trial where he was facing the death penalty. And my mom testified at his murder trial that the reason that my grandfather had shot and killed that police officer was that police officer had raped her, and she was now pregnant with his baby, who was me. And that's kind of where my life started. Eventually, my grandfather first trial ended in a hung jury. He was eventually sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And he ended up serving, the rest of his life behind bars, more than 40 years, leaving behind, his family of 15 kids and, including my mom and now me to kind of deal with the consequences of what had happened. And eventually, my mom turned 21. She ended up meeting a man who would become my stepfather. Come to find out that he was an alcoholic and very physically and emotionally abusive to me and my mom, and had to deal with that. Eventually, my mom had 4 more children with him. And because of the lifestyle that they were living, a lot of the things that needed to, common care for the kids fell upon me as the oldest. And because of all of that, my schooling definitely suffered. Eventually, I was, held back in the 4th grade. I had missed more than 60 days of school because my mom would rather me stay home and help watch the kids than go to school. And plus, I hated school. I couldn't read, I couldn't write. I still can't spell. After I flunked the 4th grade, I was placed into special ed, and to get the help that I needed there. Come to find out I have dyslexia. And so that was kind of where my life started up through 4th grade. And then eventually my stepfather was walking home drunk from a bar one night when somebody else was driving home drunk from that bar, and they ended up hitting and killing him. And it was at this time that my mom, here she is, 5 kids. She had dropped out of school in the 8th grade, no kind of education, never worked outside of the home. And as hard as her life has been to this point, losing my stepfather and kind of the looking to raise 5 kids on her own was more than she could handle. And it was at this time that she decided that she was going to take her own life. And fortunately, she was not successful with her suicide attempt. But at that time, my family got split up while she went to the hospital to get the help that she needed. And it was at that time that I went to go live with my grandmother, the wife of the man who shot and killed the police officer. And for the first time in my life, I kind of had that stable household. And then eventually my mom was released. And it was at that time that she decided that she couldn't care for all 5 kids on her own. And that's when my family kind of got split up, and I went to go live with my grandmother permanently. And my she still has, she had 15 kids. There were still a few of those kids living at home with her. And my gram was just a saint. So she was raising 4 or 5 other grandchildren for whatever reason, and now me. But living in that household, I didn't have to worry about my stepfather coming home drunk and beating on me or my mom, and didn't have to worry about waking up at 2 a.m, with crying babies. So for the first time in my life, I got to really reflect on my life and how it was going. And I remember one day I was at school, and a counselor came from the university to talk about, what you needed to do to get into college. And at this time, my life, was not great. The prospects of my life weren't great. And I kind of saw where I was heading, and I wasn't enjoying, the direction my life was going. And it kind of clicked in my mind, like, what if I could, go to college and graduate from college? And anytime that you kind of tell yourself you want to do something that's going to be hard or takes you out of your comfort zone, that voice in the back of your head starts yelling at you, don't even think about that. And I can remember, that voice telling me, Nelson, you're in special ed. You can't read, you can't write, you can't spell. The family that you come from, of my Graham's 15 children, only 2 had ever graduated from high school. None had even gone to college. And so I remember hearing all that negative self-talk. But, flash forward, my life sucked. So I needed something to change that direction. And 12 years after setting that goal, 4 different colleges, 4 years in the Air Force, I finally became that first person in my family to graduate from college. And that's when I became really obsessed with goals and personal development. I realized if somebody like me with coming from where I came from, under the circumstances that I came from, if I could graduate college, what else could I do with goals and personal development?
That it's absolutely incredible. And there's so many things in there that I think you mentioned that really would be where people would not hold it against you if you kind of just settled into what that lifestyle was. If you settled into what where you were at that time, and it's remarkable that you were able to turn that around with just sheer will of thought and everything. And something else you said there towards the end I didn't know as well, but you're a fellow Air Force vet. So I also was in the Air Force as well for just short of 11 years. So
thank you for your service.
Well, thank you for yours. So so do you think, and just to touch on that last piece a little bit before we go into the all of it, because everything there, and you didn't even get to the end of it, there's still more to tell, I know, but I want to dive in before we get too far down the road. Do you think that the Air Force was it allowed you some of the foundation to do some of those things you were able to do later on in life?
Yeah, I mean, one of the best decisions I ever did was join the Air Force. And, the kind of the way that I went into the Air Force was I ended up, the first time I went to college, I went because a school wanted me to come and play football for them. And, I ended up going for a year, but, I ended up not being able to afford to go back, with all the financial aid and everything that I got, I still couldn't afford to go back. And so the Air Force was kind of my way to continue on that dream of getting a college education, through the GI Bill. And then also, I looked at the Air Force as an opportunity to get away from my hometown, where my name and my, all the baggage that kind of followed me around with my, circumstances and my grandfather. So finally, when I joined the Air Force and I got out of that town, I could really determine what I wanted to be and who I wanted to be. For the first time, I didn't have all that baggage shackling me down, and I could be anybody that I wanted to be. And that was liberating to me.
And here's the thing that I know personally about the Air Force, and I think it kind of fits your overall story we're talking about here. A lot of people give the military credit for making their lives what it is, and that's not true, because I've seen a ton of people in my time in the military who came in there and squandered all the opportunities the military gives you. It still takes you as a person to look within yourself and say, hey, I'm going to get this degree. I'm going to do these things. I'm going to take advantage of the opportunities that the military gives me. And so I think that's part of your overall story. Anyways, what you're talking about is it takes something within you to make those things happen. It's not just that the opportunities are outside your grasp. It's that you actually have to reach for them. And it seems like with a lot of the things that you were able to do, you actually did and went out and reached for those opportunities that not necessarily were provided to you, but were in your kind of your sphere of availability, if you know what I mean.
Oh yeah. I mean, and I think that's with everything in life, is that, you got to take advantage of the opportunities that are placed before you.
Mm-hmm.
And the Air Force was one of those things where I think a lot of people could go into the Air Force and it could be the worst thing for them, because they didn't take advantage of it. And you get in trouble there. You actually have to obey rules and follow what the Air Force tells you to do. And if you don't do that, you could come out in worse shape than when you went in. But it's like anything in life. You have to take advantage of the opportunities that are placed before you. And when you do that, no matter what those opportunities are, you get to give them meaning. And that's one of the things that it kind of changed my life and changed how I look at things. Is I truly believe that we get to give meaning to everything that happens to us in this life. And if we get to give meaning to it, why on earth would we ever give anything a negative meaning?
Exactly. And I 100% agree with you. And you said something there that I always bring up whenever somebody mentions doing something like what South Korea does, not the bad Korea, the good Korea, just for anybody who didn't catch that. Is they have a mandatory 2 years of military service for the people, any of the men in that country. I don't believe it applies to women as well. And so they always say that we should do something like that here in the United States. I'm like, that would ruin so many people's lives. And personally, as a person who was in the military, would ruin the military. I can just imagine how many of those E5s, E6s and everything would have to go out there and babysit all of these kids coming in that don't actually want to be there, but have to because it's mandatory. And to your point, what would end up happening, in my opinion, is a lot of those people would get in trouble because the military does hold a standard. And if you don't meet that standard, you can get a dishonorable discharge, and that can hurt your life in a lot of different ways. When you go out to fill out different job applications, a lot of them ask that type of stuff. So I 100% again agree with you. It's not exactly what you do, not what opportunities are available to you, but which ones you take advantage of and which ones you go with. So you mentioned needing to leave your town kind of to reinvent yourself. I think that's something that I wholeheartedly agree with a lot of people, because you can't really discover who you are if everybody's telling you who you've been. So you kind of have to go out on the road and really start to set yourself up for who you want to be in life. So tell me, was the town you came up in that obviously they knew your story, probably a pretty popular story around that way. Was it a small town?
Yeah, about 6,000 people. And if you've ever lived in a small town, everybody knows your business anyhow. And then, put on top of that my grandfather and my mom's testimony and that whole thing. So yeah, there were definitely lots of stairs and points. And in my book, The Unlucky Sperm Club, I talk about some of the very interesting challenges that I had to go through, and some good stories in there that being in a small town under these circumstances that I had to deal with.
And I think the stigma of small towns sometimes can either accelerate your life or it can kind of decelerate it. And in your way, it seemed like it was a kind of a hindrance to you, because you're already talking about the struggles you went through with dyslexia and just all the other things you had going on. And then to constantly be reminded of just how you were born, how you came into being, it couldn't have been easy for you at all. Did you experience a lot of that directly to your face, or was it more whispers behind your back?
It was both. I mean, I'll share a story. In eighth grade, you get to go to your first, date dance where you actually pick up the date.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked a girl to the dance, and she said yes. And I was so excited to go. And I ended up having my cousin drive us there, using my aunt's car because, my family couldn't afford a nice enough car. And so we ended up going and went in and talked to the family that, just met that family, never had really dated this girl or really even knew her. So I go in there and I could tell, they were kind of cold and they ended up like, finally asking, well, who's driving you to the dance? And I'm like, oh, it's my cousin, and he's 17 years old.
Hmm.
And you could tell they didn't like that. And they ended up going into the room and talking to my date. And they came out and they're like, she has to leave a little bit early. So we're going to pick her up about a half an hour early from the dance. And I'm like, well, I can just bring her home early. And they're like, no, we're going somewhere and it's on the way. It'll just be easier. I'm like, okay. And, I didn't think anything of it. And so we went to the dance and had a good time. And yeah, there was her parents to pick her up a half an hour early. Well, I ended up dating this girl all through high school. And so they got to know me and they eventually told me, what's going on that night. I mean, they weren't going to let her go with me because they had known, my family and who I was. And the reason, when I told them that my cousin was driving us, I mean, they thought that our plan was that we were going to pull over and rape their daughter.
Oh,
And
geez.
the reason that, so whenever we left, the dad actually followed us to the dance to make sure that we took her to the dance and dropped her off. And then the reason that they picked her up early was because they didn't want us to drive her home and have to worry about that. So there were things like that I had to deal with. And, in that small town because of what happened and who I was.
That that's that's absolutely ridiculous, obviously, for a number of reasons. The primary one being obviously that I don't know how you got connected as a rapist, but it is
Yeah.
just the way that people's minds work in those things. So I don't want to go too far into that because that's pretty messed up. But so all right, so let's go back a little bit to your story again. You finish your bachelor's degree. What's next for you? You're out of the military, I'm guessing, and you've got your bachelor's degree. What's next? How do you go on from there?
Yeah. So, I mean, it was at that time that I kind of realized the power of goals and personal development. And I started to really become obsessed with them and started to use them in my every area of my life. I saw the power, like if somebody like me could get that degree using this, I started to, buy all the books and go to any seminar I could, afford to go to in the magazines. And I just started using them in every area of my life. I ended up getting into commercial real estate right out of college and, was successful in that. I actually became the number one producer, worldwide for a top five commercial real estate firm. I used goals and personal development to start, more than 10 businesses, was fortunate enough to build, one of the largest privately held pet resorts in the country. Started a chain of children's learning centers and multiple other businesses. And, fortunately, flash forward, we were able to exit those businesses. And now, a few years ago, I was thinking, okay, now what am I going to do? I'm still young. It's not in me to kind of prop my feet up and just kind of ride off into the sunset. So it's kind of that question, what would you do if money didn't matter anymore, and thinking about legacy and what you want to leave behind in this world. And I thought about how powerful goals and personal development was in my life. And I wanted to help other people, finally achieve their goals and live the life that they want to live. Because I saw there's so many people out there that were just a few choices, away from living a drastically different life. And I would see those people and, my heart would go out to them because I would see, man, if you could just figure out how to do this or stick to that in all areas of life. I mean, whether it be business or, financial or health or what have you. And so I went about designing a program from all the things that I had learned over the last 25 years, what helped me, succeed, and came up with my program called I Got Smarter. I designed an app for it so it was easy to use. And, that's what I'm doing now, and had written my book, my memoir / self-help book, The Unlucky Sperm Club. And now I'm just out there trying to get my message to as many people as I can so that they can use these strategies and techniques and philosophies that have helped me kind of come from where I was to eventually, living a life that I couldn't have even imagined, growing up.
So throughout your process of trying to develop that, was there a lot of trial and error that you kind of found yourself going through to figure out what worked for you individually, or was it more general in a sense of just finding out what works for everyone?
No, I mean, this is the stuff that worked for me. Like I said, I was obsessed with it. I mean, there's probably not very many programs out there that I haven't used or books that I haven't read. And, New Year's Day was always my favorite day of the year because, I'd sit down and kind of do the goals and reflect upon last year. And I just loved it. And got excited about what I was going to be able to do the following year, and just really working on myself and becoming that best version of myself. I mean, I just feel like we owe it to the world to become the best version of us possible. And I was always excited about that, and just dug into it probably deeper than anybody really should. But I loved it, and that's what I brought to this program, and to help other people from my mistakes and where I fell short. I absolutely was not perfect or even close to it. But when I realized where I fell short, I looked for a workaround, or how I could not, fail that way again. And I built all of that stuff into this program.
And I think that's really the benefit of something like what you're presenting here is that you're not just speaking from a place of, hey, I got lucky and made a life out of this initial luck that I had or whatever. Obviously, you had the opposite. You got kind of unlucky as far as those cards go with what you were born into and everything, but you got lucky that you were able to actually make something out of it. And luck, as they often say, this is very cliche, I know, is, when preparation meets opportunity, and that's exactly what you kind of came out the other end of. So I think it's great when somebody like yourself, who is not speaking from a perspective of, hey, here's what worked for me just because I got it right on the first try, but more so because you went through all these ups and downs, you failed, and then were able to come out the other side of it. And like, hey, after doing all these things, here's what worked for me. Because I think there's a lot more power in that, because the one thing I always try to tell people, and it's a very hard message for people to really sit with inside themselves, is success requires failure. You have to fail time and time again at things. Otherwise, you don't know your limits and you don't know what you need to push beyond. If you only do what you know you can do, you're never going to actually grow and get better at anything.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I love that. And no one likes to fail. I mean, but if you're not failing, you're not trying. And I mean, it doesn't have to be huge catastrophic failures like, failing at a complete business. I mean, it's those little failures every day on how I could have done this better, or done this better, or in your relationships. I fail every day in my relationships. Am I the dad that I want to be? I need to do this a little better, or, am I the husband that I need to be? So, any relationship that you have, those little failures, that's where you learn. And I mean, talking about luck, I mean, that's why I named my book The Unlucky Sperm Club, because, you think about that your success is geared towards what circumstances you were in, or you were born into. And I'm a true believer that you create your own luck, and another cliche is the harder you work, the luckier you get.
Yeah.
And I truly believe, everything has the meaning you're willing to give it. And that was the one thing, with my whole story that I just told you. When I moved to Las Vegas, the only person that knew of those events was my wife. And I told her that before I married her. I figured she definitely had a right to know all that stuff before she said I do. But I never told my kids about it. I never told any of my friends. I was running from that. Mm-hmm. And then whenever I kind of thought about it and thought about what I wanted to do, and, why I was kind of born in that situation, I started to think, maybe I was born in that situation so that I could take this message out there to the world and really show people that you're not a victim of your circumstances, that you're a product of your choices. And as soon as I started giving that a positive meaning, the circumstances of my birth, that's when I started to get power from it. That's when I started to be energized by that instead of deflated and weakened by it. So, give things a positive meaning, and they will be positive, because no matter what happens to us, chances are there's some sort of positive there, that if you dig deep enough, you'll find that positive meaning behind everything.
Absolutely. And I think, like you were just saying there, and as I'm sure you say many times in your book, The Unlucky Sperm Club, you're already going to be born into whatever circumstances you're going to be born into. You still have to do something with it. You can either acquiesce to those circumstances and become a product of those circumstances, or you can be a story of, like yourself, of overcoming those circumstances. Either way, your circumstances already exist. So sitting there and lamenting, sorry, I said that backwards, lamenting them is not going to change those circumstances, but doing the work to change them will. And even if you don't reach, say, the height of success like you have, you're going to better yourself. You're going to be better than you were when you started.
Yeah. And I mean, you talk about being born into a situation, kind of the spinoff of my book title, The Unlucky Sperm Club. We've all heard of the people who are born into the Lucky Sperm Club, the Trumps and the Kardashians and all these people that are born into wealth and influence. And then I think a lot of us think, well, of course they're successful. I mean, look where they were born. They had everything going for them. But a lot of times we see that people who are born into that privilege don't necessarily live great lives, because that's all all their wants are taken away from them. And that's why I titled my book The Unlucky Sperm Club, because I think if you use hard circumstances, if you can give that a positive meaning, then I think you have fuel, in your fire to kind of go out there and live your dreams and really be motivated to get further away from, maybe those tough circumstances that you were either born in or that you find yourself in now.
Have you read the book, The Millionaire Next Door?
Yep.
Yeah. And don't worry, I'm not trying to steal thunder from you, because I think that book is highly overrated. I think you can get through like 2 pages of that and get basically the gist of everything they're saying. But that book, which is, I believe, written by economists, backs up what you're saying. Most of the people who are born into like a silver spoon type of lifestyle don't become that. They actually squander kind of a lot of that. The research says that most of the people who actually become millionaires weren't born millionaires. They worked themselves into it. So that supports exactly what you're talking about. Yes, some people are born into it and maybe maintain it. So for every Paris Hilton, there's a Nikki Hilton as well. You know what I mean? But at the same time, the majority of people who actually make a financial success of themselves were not born into it, and they did it unto themselves. So that is an uplifting message to realize. And again, you have to take that to heart. Otherwise, you can't do anything with it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And that's why I titled this book. I really feel like, I'm part of that Lucky Sperm Club. Even as hard as those circumstances were that I was born under, if I weren't born under those circumstances, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you about this. And who knows how my life would have ended up, if I would have been born into, a plush, family and had everything given to me. I almost guarantee I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. So maybe I'm the lucky one, that considering that I made it out of there.
So you just said something that I love, and it's something that I've been trying to form my mindset around over the past few years, is that I am lucky in specific ways. I'm unlucky in other ways. You need to understand that not everything in your life is under your control, but it is all your fault. So what that means is no matter what ends up happening to you, it's your fault for it happening, and it's your fault for making it better or making it worse or wherever else you go. So you have to understand there is, and I always sound like a nihilist when I say this, and maybe I am becoming more nihilistic as I grow older, but life is chaos. It's going to happen in good moments. It's going to happen in bad moments. You really can't necessarily control that, but you can ride that wave and try to understand and be grateful for the things that you do have that have allowed you to be lucky, and the other things that have caused you to be unlucky. Hopefully learn some lesson from. So like you said, maybe you weren't born into lucky circumstances, but you were born lucky in the way that you were able to deal with that. And that's how I consider my own background as well. I didn't grow up a silver spoon at all. I barely had a spoon. So I'm lucky because of who I was born into that situation, and the nature of my nurturing environment allowed me to become what I am today. And I consider myself a relative success, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree with you 100%. I mean, we can't control, you know, there's a lot of times we can't control what happens to us, but we can control how we react to it and what we do with that. And, you know, they talk about, you know, you can't control the waves of the ocean, but you can control how you set your sails.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we need to realize is we need to take control for our own success. And that's one of the things that I see where a lot of people stumble is they blame, you know, their lack of success or trials in their life. They blame it on other people or other things or, you know, the economy, whatever. They blame it on something else. And as soon as you start blaming it and assigning your problem to something else, you have no control over it anymore. You can't control how to fix it, because if you give that, if the reason that this happened to you or the reason that you're like this is because of somebody else, then the only way to fix that is to wait for somebody else to fix it for you or to change. But if you take responsibility for that, if you are the one in control, then you have control to fix it. And I truly believe we are all exactly where we choose to be. And think about that. I mean, no matter where you're at, I mean, you know, 99% of the time you've chosen to be there, whether it be where you're at in your relationships, where your bank account's at, where your business is at, you know, where your health is at. We choose to be where we are right now. And if we don't like that, we can choose to be somewhere else. All we have to do is start making those choices that will get us there.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. I think one of the ways I've heard it described before, and I won't back you into the corner to necessarily get your opinion on these things or whatever, but, you know, systemic racism, the economy, as you said, COVID being a great example of that. All these different things happen that we kind of talked about before. They're the chaotic elements that we can't control. You're not necessarily always responsible for everything in your life, but like you said before, you're responsible for how you react and where you go from there. So again, I may lose my job tomorrow. The place I live in may kick me out. All these things, I have to still live with that. I have to still do something about that after that happens. So even though all these factors exist that may have put you in a bad predicament, you still are responsible for changing that. So I 100% agree with that message, because I don't think wallowing in the situations that you're in do any good. And I don't think they make you any better the next day.
No, I mean, you know, the best thing that any of your listeners can do right now is take 100% responsibility for their own success.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that's one thing that I've been able to do is, you know, I've never looked to blame anybody. I've never looked to my circumstances for an excuse. I've always taken 100% responsibility for my success. Who else, you know, who else would help me be successful? There's tons of people out there that will help you and support you, but you at the end have 100% responsibility for your own success.
And I think one of the realizations that helped me really take that to heart is that every relationship in your life is symbiotic. And what I mean by that is you're going to give and you're going to get. We don't have these relationships that we try to pretend from movies and everything like that are just completely just giving. Everybody's giving. No, you're a friend with somebody because they're entertaining, because they care about you, because they do these things for you, and you do the same for them. That's kind of how relationships work. So when you're talking about that, what that means is somebody can do something to you, but then you also have something that you're doing in that situation as well. And you have to continue to evaluate those relationships on that principle. So as you said, if something is someone else's fault, that's fine. Maybe somebody cut you off in traffic, hit your car, whatever they did, that is where it starts. But that's a symbiotic relationship. The blame you assign them, you also need to take some of that yourself and say, all right, that happened. How do we get better? How do we do the next thing? And realize that you only give them power if you continue to give them power in that blaming them for that stuff. And like you said, everything's your fault. Everything's your responsibility, but that's a good thing. That means
Absolutely.
everything's within your control, ultimately, with where you go from it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you know, you can't control what people do to you. All you can do is control how you react to it. So I agree 100% with that.
Yeah, so like you said, if that same situation, if somebody hits my car, that's a start. If I get out of my car and beat them with a hammer, that's a whole other thing. Now my fault. I can't go to jail and go, oh, if that guy hadn't just hit my car. It's like, yeah, he did hit your car, but then you beat him with a hammer. So there's more to the story than just you getting hit.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yep. And again, I mean, I think a lot of this is mindset. I mean, what type of mindset are we bringing along with us when it comes to success, and getting out of that victim mindset, and rationalizing reasons that we might not act the way that we want to act. I mean, one of the strategies that we use at I Got Smarter is we have this alter ego, and we all have that perfect version of ourselves that lives within us, and they always make that right decision. And my alter ego's name is Fred, and Fred is perfect. If Fred's on a diet, he'd never dream of skipping a workout or eating chocolate cake that's in the refrigerator. Even though Nelson would, he'd eat the whole entire cake. But Fred makes those right choices. And what we teach is, ask that alter ego whenever you have a question, what would they do? And when you ask what they would do, that's typical, is going to get you to be successful. And that alter ego, it's like a muscle. The more that you ask those questions and your alter ego helps you, the easier it gets. And then what you realize is you start to grow closer to becoming that perfect version of yourself. And eventually what happens is that perfect version of yourself actually even gets even more better as you grow closer to it. And it's that process of becoming the best version of yourself is continual. I mean, success isn't an event, right? Success is a process. And that's what we need to do, is continue to work on ourselves. And one thing that I really realize with goals is it's not about getting things or going places, or it's about becoming that better version of yourself that can accomplish those goals. We're always should be working on ourselves. That should be our number one priority. And as you work on yourself and you become that better version of yourself, all your dreams and your goals are going to follow, the type of person that you become.
And so does the book and your I Got Smarter, which is an app, right?
Yeah, it's an app. Yep.
Okay. So does the book and the I Got Smarter app, they kind of work in tandem, right? They work together. They kind of feed off of each other that way.
You know what? The book is a memoir / self-help. So it kind of talks about my life and kind of the trials and the struggles that I've gone through. And then, the lessons that I learned. It's about inspiring people and motivating people, in the book. And then I talk about kind of from these experiences, from these circumstances, now what I want to do with my life is the I Got Smarter program to help other people, finally live, and accomplish, their life's biggest goals.
Okay, I got you. And so through the I Got Smarter app, it kind of gives you more of that accountability and that feedback and everything on a more consistent basis compared to the book, like you said, which is more foundational and kind of gives your own personal story and the lessons you learned from it.
The book is more inspirational and motivation. And we all know inspiration and motivation only last so long, right?
Exactly.
The I Got Smarter program is the nuts and bolts of how you're actually going to be able to accomplish your life's biggest goals and actually see them through to the end, through all the strategies and techniques and philosophies that are found in that program. So the book will get you motivated to do something, and I Got Smarter will actually help see it through to the end.
That's awesome. So how long is your I Got Smarter app? How long has that been out?
You know what? COVID has kind of upset us too. I mean, I had an app out that was called 6 Months to Success, but that required people to meet in person into groups.
Mm-hmm.
And with COVID, we couldn't do that. But, like so many other things, we had to pivot. And so we went back and designed an app that utilized our program virtually, and where you could have a success partner virtually through the app. And so that app is out there right now. We are putting the final touches on it and scrambling and hoping that everything will be good to go come January, when people really start focusing on their New Year's resolutions and goals. And, after the year that we've all had, I think 2021 is going to be one of those years where people really want to get after it and make up for lost time.
I apologize in advance for doing this, but I have to. Otherwise, I wouldn't be the dad joke champ of my household. So essentially, you had one app, then COVID happened, and you got smarter, and you made I got smarter.
I love that dad joke. And I'm glad other people are out there telling dad jokes, because my kids, think that I'm the only one with these dad jokes out there. So thank you.
As I aged, I'm telling you again, I went from wanting to laugh when I tell a joke to a groan. If I can get a groan, oh, that's so satisfying. I love it.
Hey, that's a good strategy. I think I'm going to use that. I'm just no laughs. If I get a groan, I'm going to chalk it up to a successful joke.
Because the dad jokes are like McDonald's. Nobody likes it, yet they're in business for a reason, right? So my girlfriend, when we first got together, I'd make dad jokes all the time, and she would get the groan and everything like that. But then whenever she got in like a nervous situation, say she was studying for a test or something like that or whatever, she would text me and ask me to tell her a dad joke, because it helped her. Like the groan would be stress relief for her. So they have their place, and I defend them as the purest form of comedy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Love it. Love it.
That's awesome. So, all right. So when you said you're trying to launch the app in early January?
Yeah, I mean, the app is out there, and it's functional. In fact, we're giving away a free month of it, just so people can try it out. We're just in there right now, just trying to make it better and more functional and more user friendly and all of that. But yeah, it's out there. It's usable. I use it every single day. And it makes a huge difference. I mean, there's so many things built into this app. What I've done in this app is I've designed all the things that I've struggled with and failed with my goals. So, I mean, the first thing is in this app is you do a self-assessment, and it really goes through and makes sure that you know where you're at, and it makes sure that you know what goals you truly want to accomplish. Because one of the worst things that you can do is think that you want to accomplish a goal, and then after you've worked on it for a long time, you realize that it's not a goal that you wanted, and maybe that you weren't willing to sacrifice everything that you had to sacrifice in order to achieve it. So we make sure that you know that you're working on those goals that are important to you. And I Got Smarter is actually an acronym. Each one of those letters stands for something in our program. So the very first thing is I, and that lets you know that you're really working on that individual that you see in the mirror every day. You're always working on yourself. And in order to accomplish your goals, you need to become that person that can accomplish those goals. So we're always working on the individual. And every day you start in the app through our morning ritual, we always start with gratitude, because what we found is if you don't have that attitude of gratitude, if you're not happy for what you have now, chances are you won't be happy for what you're going to get. So we teach that, and we teach success philosophies and all of the techniques in I Got Smarter throughout the app. And then we review our goals. And of course, we teach you how to write a proper goal and how to word it. And we teach you how to take big goals and break them down into what we call 30-day sprints, because so many people have these big, huge goals. But when you have a big goal that's going to take you a year or 5 years or even 10 years, you don't have that sense of urgency on what has to happen today. So we teach you to break those goals down into a 30-day sprint, and then every single day matters. And we teach you to even break that down into milestones and work on that. But one of the secret things, sauce of our app is you can invite a success partner, and that success partner sees what you're doing in real time, as far as if you've done your morning ritual or your evening ritual. Have you checked off your goal to-dos? And if you haven't, they'll see that as well. And then they can encourage you and motivate you and kind of let you know that they're there to help you and get you back on board if you do happen to kind of fall off the wagon.
Yeah, and the first thing you said there is something that I love, and I try to preach to anyone when they ask me, oh, what should I do with my money? What should I do this with? I'm like, first, you define success. Success is not this vague thing that's out there in the ether that you can just go, oh, I want to be successful. It's like, all right, what does that mean? What does that mean to you? Do you want to make $100,000 a year? Do you want to own two homes, one vacation home, one regular home? Like, what is success for you? You have to start with defining it. Otherwise, you're not working towards something. You're just working, you know?
Yeah. And that's one of the things in this program. And one of the biggest problems with goal setting is we make sure that your goals are crystal clear. Because think about the last time that you fell short on a goal. Chances are you didn't really know what was next or what that clear next action is. So part of the I Got Smarter program is, one, being very clear on what your goal is. And then two, every day planning out your day, knowing exactly what you have to accomplish this day in order to accomplish your goal. And when you know what needs to happen, chances are you're going to do it. But where people struggle is they get to a point like, what do I need to really do today to accomplish this goal? And then all of a sudden that's not clear. And then they kind of lose momentum and kind of quit. And then eventually what they realize, it's been a year since they've worked on that goal because they didn't know what that next step was.
Absolutely. So how do people find the app right now? If they wanted to, they're listening to this and they want to go sign up, how would they find it?
It's on all the app stores. So you can just go there, type in I Got Smarter. It's one word. And it should pop up. You can also go to nelsontressler.com and everything is there. In fact, you can sign up for the free 30 days there. And you can also find the book, The Unlucky Sperm Club, there.
Awesome. And I'll make sure I link all that down in the description of this episode and everything. So, but the book's on Amazon, I presume?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. You can just type in the title and it's there.
Awesome. Awesome. I'll make sure I link all that type of stuff. So if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you a couple of personal questions. I figured since you're such a forthcoming person, it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on these. But one of the things when I first was looking at your story and everything, and your grandfather shooting the police officer, what is your interpretation kind of that thought? You know, because I think a lot of us, myself, I love The Count of Monte Cristo. I love Chan-wook Park's revenge series. That's a South Korean director. I like revenge stories. So part of me hears that story about your grandfather, and you're like, first of all, I think my grandfather, maternal grandfather, would have done something similar had that happened. But also, just what do you feel about that? Just what are your thoughts on what the action your grandfather took?
You know what? There's a lot of twists and turns in that story that I go into in my book.
Okay.
So I would think doing that. I mean, but me, frankly, I'm not a revengeful person. I mean, I'm more of a forgive and forget. And I don't want to lug around any kind of animosity of anybody, truthfully, because it weighs you down. And I've done that a lot of my life where I wanted to get back at people and, I resented people. But what I found is as soon as I quit doing that and I started just focusing on myself, that weight was taken off of me of, not liking somebody for a reason or whatever. So I'm more of a forgive and forget and focus on what I can do and really focus on, my actions.
And the way, and this is my own rationalization for not taking those revengeful behaviors that I think are fever dreams, if you will, for me, is that generally speaking, when we're talking about revenge, when we're talking about avenging some slight that someone did to you, it's not going to make your life better. It's only going to make their life worse. And for me, maybe I'm selfish, maybe I'm self-centered, whatever it's going to be. I always take the action that's going to benefit my life or those close to me the most. And so, for example, and that's something like we're talking about here, that action will feel good for me as a person, but it's going to hurt those that I love. It's going to hurt potentially my life as well, because now I'm in prison or whatever else, those type of things. Yeah. So I agree with you. I think it's best to try to, when you can, to move on with them, with your life, to deal with the feelings you have of whatever situation caused you to want to be vengeful, but then to go on from there and try to make your life better from it.
The one way that I kind of think of it whenever I feel that urge to want to get back at somebody is, I've heard this is, if a rattlesnake bites you, you have two choices. You can chase after that rattlesnake and try to kill it. But the chances are when you do that, you're going to die because you've got that venom going through your body. Or you can choose to go seek help and get away from that rattlesnake and go take care of yourself. And and get better. And that's the choices when it comes to wanting to seek revenge is, yeah, somebody might have wronged you and you can go after them, but the chances are that venom that's running through you is going to kill you. And or you can go seek help, get away from that, and work on yourself on getting better.
Yeah, I definitely know some people would kill that rattlesnake and just worry
Yeah,
about what happens to them after.
yeah.
But and again, cliche is all get out, but I still believe this is, again, maybe because I'm self-centered that way, but success is the best revenge. If somebody has done something to me or whatever, I'm like, I want my success to be a marker of how that didn't take me down. I want my life to continue on, and hopefully, because I'm super petty sometimes, to just be better than them, in a better place, either financially or literally. Maybe they still live in the middle of nowhere in some small town that, not that there's anything wrong with all small towns, but some of them just aren't good, So I agree with agree with you 100%, just because I'm always about trying to improve my life and those that I care about. And generally speaking, going out and getting revenge on somebody won't do that. Now, every once in a while in the office, you can send like a slightly tersely worded email, and that'll get that little energy that you need from that. But that's about it.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm all about, I hate negative energy. I mean, with this book, I've had some haters come out against me, and what I realize is, those haters aren't hating on me. It's not about me. It's about them, and where some sort of somebody else's success is reflecting upon their success, and having that mindset is it's that I have an abundant mindset. I know there's enough success out there for everybody who wants it.
Mm-hmm.
Just because somebody else is successful doesn't mean that means there's less success in the universe for me. I look for everybody else to have success and to do well. In fact, that's why I've started this program. Is I want to make the world a better place, one person and one inspiring goal at a time. And by other people's success, it's going to make a better world for me, a better world for my kids and my eventual grandkids. So that's kind of the mindset that I bring with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Almost every person that we have in a revered status in our history is revered because they overcame those people who hated them. You look at Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., any of the founders of this country, they went to war over it, like all those type of things. It requires somebody to hate you, essentially, for you to be revered. And so that's kind of what you're talking about when you're doing something that is trying to change the world, even if it's only for one person. The people who don't want the world to change are going to fight you. The people
Yeah.
who don't have the energy to change themselves are going to fight you, because your success is a reflection of their failures, is the way they see it a lot of times.
Yeah, and I mean, haters. Haters are a particular bunch out there. I mean, they don't want to put in the energy and the effort to build something,
Mm-hmm.
so they take the easy way out, and then they try to tear things down. And that's what they're trying to do with people that they're hating on. Is they're building this thing that is somehow making them feel inferior, and because they don't want to put in that effort to build their own lives or their own successes or their own relationships, they're going to take the easy way out and try to tear other things down that they feel is making them look bad.
Oh, absolutely. And I've said this many times, and I'll say it a million times more, because it's always, one, it's funny to me, but it's also true. What we see today, it's a lot easier to be a hater than it used to be, because it used to be, back in the day, somebody would have to go out and actually buy a stamp, buy an envelope and everything, and write a letter and then mail it into you and then hope that you read it. Now they just go on their phone in 2 seconds, boom, they've sent something off, and it's just vitriolic and terrible. So now
Yeah.
it's a lot easier to be a hater. Back then, if you actually wrote a letter or did something like that, you really, really disliked somebody, or you just
Yeah.
had nothing to do.
Yeah, and I feel bad for haters because I know where that's coming from. I know it's not about me, and those are the people I want to help. I want to help those people have a different mindset and quit focusing on other people's successes and start focusing on their own. Because when again, when you're your energy goes where you focus, and if you're always focusing on other people's successes and it's making you feel less adequate, let's start focusing on yourself and focusing on your own success, and reaching your goals, as opposed to trying to slow somebody else down or stop somebody else's goals.
Do you think that people are, I don't want to say scared, but maybe feel guilty for working on themselves these days, because we've kind of put up this message out, from after school programs, or excuse me, after school specials on TV and everything else that's going on, that you're constantly supposed to worry about everybody else. You're constantly supposed to be a good member of society and all that type of stuff. And so do you think do you think people feel guilty sometimes when they overly focus on themselves?
You know what? If they are, they shouldn't be, because the only way that to help other people is to become a better version of yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
To become a good person that can help other people. I mean, it's kind of that saying, when you're putting on your oxygen mask on the airplane,
Yeah.
put yours on first, right? And then help other people. And that's what we're doing when we're focusing on ourselves and becoming better versions of ourselves. I mean, there's so much good done by people who have done really well in their lives. I mean, you look at like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, they're going to be giving away billions and billions of dollars to help so many other people that weren't able to do it by themselves. So if they didn't focus on themselves and accomplish their dreams, so many other people wouldn't be affected by their success. And that's the key, is what are you going to do with your success? What are you going to do whenever you do reach that success? Are you going to help, or are you just going to be a person that wants to take it all with them? I think most people are good out there, and most people want to help other people. And by being successful in anything, you're going to be able to help more people than if you're not successful.
Absolutely, 100% agree. As they always say, if you're not good, you're not doing as well as you could, even if you're trying to help people. Even say you sacrifice all day and you help people. If you're mentally, say, not you're malnourished physically, or you're mentally just unstable, or whatever the problem is with you, then you're not doing as good of a job to help others as you could. And that's the same thing I think with success. Like you said, there are people who, and again, all of these paths of life have value. I don't want to downplay anybody else's value by saying something about Bill Gates or whatever, but Bill Gates doing what he does with the way the world works, which is money drives a lot of things, giving away those billions of dollars can change a lot more lives than maybe somebody volunteering locally. And again, they both have value, but what we're talking about is you don't have to sacrifice your success to help other people. You can do both things if that's part of who you want to be.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing with success, and I think a lot of people have some negative thoughts on success, and particularly financial success,
Mm-hmm.
that people have that mindset. But, all I think is, I think money, uh, extenuates what type of person you are. If you're a good person and now you have money, you're going to do more good things. It's going to allow you that freedom to do that. And if you're a bad person and you get more money, it's just going to allow you to be even a worse person. So I don't think that money success really has much to do with whether you're a good person or not. But I do think that it allows you to kind of show on a bigger scale how good of a person you are, or maybe how bad of a person you are, less thoughtful or whatever.
And just to add to that as well, sometimes you shouldn't have money at certain phases of your life. I can tell you right now, I am 100% certain of this. If I had been born into money, I would have been a scumbag, an absolute scumbag. I can tell you, I just know it was part of who I was. And I needed to go through the trials and tribulations that I went through to develop the empathy and those type of things that I have. Same thing. I always used to make this joke as well, that the only thing at 18, the only thing that separated me and Charlie Sheen was millions of dollars. If I had millions of dollars at Charlie Sheen's age, I would have been nuts. I would have been absolutely doing all the Tiger Blood and all the stuff that he was doing as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And that just goes to my point. It just kind of shows what type of person you are if you have that. So,
Mm-hmm.
and, some of the good things is if you don't, and you have to work at it, and you gain those things a little bit differently, and everything kind of has its time. And, fortunately for you, it sounds like it took some time to do it, but now you're appreciating it, a lot more than if it would have just been handed to you.
Oh, absolutely. I've come out the other side. But like you said, that came from actually doing the work of looking at myself and being honest with who I am as a person and who I believe myself to want to be. And then doing the work to get there, and then doing the self analysis to do that. And I think that's for a lot of people is really what's scary and why they don't do a lot of these things, because they don't want to think too hard about who they are and challenge their own beliefs of what they are. Because a lot of times we create this image of ourselves that isn't true. It's inauthentic. And then when we evaluate our actions, we don't behave like the people that we think we are sometimes. And then that first realization is how you change a lot of things. And a lot of people just aren't ready for that uncomfortable conversation with themselves. And I had to do that for myself. And luckily, again, I say this in a lucky in a self-development way. It was an unlucky situation. But when I was in the military, my job got deleted, and I was an E5 who was doing kind of legwork for some E3s and things like that because I didn't have a job. And so I had a lot of time. I got depressed and I did a lot of things that I shouldn't have done. But it allowed me to look at myself and go, is this who you want to be? Is this where you want the story to stop for you and you want to become part of these circumstances? Or do you want to turn that page and go do the next thing? And so that, again, if I had not had those experiences, I know that I do not have the natural personality within me to have done what I'm doing now without all the trials and tribulations. So I'm thankful for them now that they're over.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, again, you chose to take those things that were happening to you and give them a positive spin and a positive meaning in your life. And because you did that, now you are where you are. Just like many people could take those same situations and kind of use those circumstances to kind of become a victim, and it wasn't your fault. And, it's all our mindset, and it's all the meaning that we're willing to give things.
Absolutely. As I always say, one of the scariest things about being an adult is you realize how many choices you have and how many choices you have to make. And that can be empowering, or it can be freezing. It can be frightening for a lot of people. It freezes them and they don't make any choice, which is still a choice. Not making a choice still becomes a choice, because you can't just stay still. Life is going to move around you. You just choose whether or not you help control the flow of it.
Yeah. And I mean, freedom of choice is like one of the things that I just love. I mean, and it's so liberating to me, and maybe it's my mindset, but that freedom to choose gives you that opportunity to, reinvent yourself with every single choice.
Mm-hmm.
I talk about this in my book a little bit. If you feel like you've been dealt a raw hand of cards, you get to discard one time to get a better hand.
Mm-hmm.
Life is even better than that, because you get to discard your hand as many times as you like, and you get to do that by making different choices and better choices. And if you don't like the situation that you're in, start making different choices, and that hand that you've been dealt, all of a sudden you get to discard it, and by making different choices, you get to see what the next hand brings you.
Absolutely. I love it. Because like you said, there's always more cards.
Yeah.
To some extent, generally speaking, there's always more cards, but for the purpose of this analogy, there's always more cards. So
Yeah.
I love that. So anyways, I thank you so much, man, for coming on here and sharing your story. Thank you. Let me say this, because I'm trying to do this a lot more these days. I want to be earnest with people, and I want to give them the respect and the kudos that I think we're too tight with giving people props for the things they do. I think we're so negative when it comes to talking about people that we always look at the bad things they do, and we're willing to say that very quickly, but we won't tell them the good things that they're doing. So I just want to say thank you for sharing your story, because I know for a lot of people, they don't want to share anything bad about themselves in general. So, but I think there's a lot of power in doing that. Sharing your bad makes your good that much better, but it also lets other people who are going through that bad know there's a way out. There's somebody else who's done this and who's gone through that. And that doesn't come easy, because like you said, in your town, all these people knew about your story, and then you escaped from it, and then you went out and told other people. Now you're becoming that to a lot of different people, and you're facing what could be a stigma, but you're like, you know what? It's worth the risk to help other people. It's worth the risk to do other things. So I really appreciate anybody who's out there trying to do the greater good. And I really just want to say thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for writing the book. Thank you for developing the app and all the stuff you're doing. I think it's really, really cool. And I really, really hope it helps as many people as possible.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on the show. I love the conversation, and hopefully your listeners got a few things that they can take action on right away, and start changing the direction of their life if that's necessary for them.
Thanks for checking out this episode of Starting Nowhere.